Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ryan Bijan, host of Cowtown Movie Classics, and tonight we are going back to the silent era to see Cecil B. DeMille's first ever large, lavish epic based directly on a Bible story. From 1923, it is the original version of The Ten Commandments. And joining us tonight is silent film historian and film preservationist, Miss Tracey Goessel. How are you doing tonight, Tracey?
I'm well, thank you very much. And I have to say that I am filling in for the fellow who's the real expert on DeMille, Mark Vieira, and I'm honored to be in his shoes, but I do not have his expertise on DeMille, so I apologize to the audience in advance.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm sure you're as great of a substitute as can be. And let me just give a shout out to Mark. Obviously, Mark is a wonderful historian and author, and he had to bow out due to health-related issues, but I really do wish him a speedy recovery. So, Tracey, what was your first exposure to this 1923 version of the Ten Commandments?
Oh, my God. You're going to reveal my age. It was at least 30 years ago, and it was in a fuzzy, dreadful copy. And when you see a fuzzy, dreadful copy run at the wrong speed, it's hard to really judge a film. I apologize for the snoring dog at my feet. I do not have a drunken hobo in my office. But when I saw it again very recently, because you asked me to step in for Mark, I was more impressed with it than I expected to be and that I remembered. Although I have to say that DeMille as a director, particularly in the teens, was a real force. And when I say a threat to D.W. Griffith, I mean reputationally. He was doing things that were even more imaginative than Griffith. He sort of picked up from where Griffith left off and then took things further. So in the teens, he's got films that are really interesting and really to die for, like The Cheat, and then this big epic Joan the Woman, which if you see a restored version, it's really impressive. So this 1923 film is, to me, transitional DeMille. He still has his bag of tricks. He's a very effective director. But he is starting to slide into the let's watch the orgy, guys, kind of filmmaking that he started in the 20s after he finished a series of wonderful domestic comedies with Gloria Swanson and Tom Meehan. So you're seeing DeMille sort of as he's at his silent film directorial best, and before or just about the time he starts to decline into the pulp novel kind of naked ladies on the golden chalice sort of film that you start to see a lot of out of DeMille in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, we definitely get a little bit of that here in the prologue. And I think it's worth noting, we're saying it's the original version of the Ten Commandments, but I think people coming in to see a full biblical epic, like the Moses biopic version, they might be a little bit disappointed.
Or surprised.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just so our audience knows, if they're not familiar with this film, the actual Exodus sequence, it's more or less an extended prologue, and then we pick up in the present day, circa 1923. Why was this? I mean, was DeMille not confident that he could maybe hold an audience's attention with the Bible lessons, or what do you think? Why did he decide to do it this way?
Jeannie McPherson, who at sometimes was DeMille's mistress, so the, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife sort of thing was something he was happy to look past, worked with DeMille at the beginning, and the whole reason they did the Ten Commandments was because they had a contest, a newspaper contest, and the winner gets $1,000, which in 1923 is about $20,000 in today's money. And all kinds of ideas came in. What should be Cecil B. DeMille's next film? But one fellow who was a lubricant manufacturer in the middle of the Midwest sent in a suggestion that said, if you break the 10 Commandments, they will break you. So they started out going, should we just have a series of little episodes, like vignettes? This one breaks the thou shalt not steal. This one breaks the thou shalt not kill. It would be kind of boring to have the one thou shalt have no other gods before me or worship graven images. But, then they thought, no, that can't hold an audience. So they elected to do a real biblical epic, but pack in only the good stuff. By the time we start the story of Moses, which takes up the first third of the film, he's already brought a bunch of the curses upon Egypt. We're practically done. We don't even get to see the locusts, but we do get to see the parting of the Red Sea and all the Pharaoh's carriages drowning and all this sort of fabulous biblical epic stuff. But then the second half of the movie, the second 2/3 of the movie, forgive me, is a modern jazz age story. And DeMille uses it, the tale of two brothers, the good one and the bad one, kind of like Cain and Abel. Anyway, to demonstrate the narrative of if you break this commandment and this commandment and this commandment, what's going to happen to you. So we have Richard Dix as the good brother and a young unknown Rod LaRock as the bad brother, and they fill out the rest of the story. And the jazz age one is sort of almost like a little insurance policy for DeMille, because great big period epics were a scary thing to do in 1923, and Fairbanks's Robin Hood had only come out in October of 22 and was a tremendous success, and both financially and critically. And then everybody started saying, well, I guess we can make epic films and make money, but it still was scary. So this is like a little hybrid.
Yeah, and I think it works. Again, like you said, it's quite surprising if you're not familiar with that format, but I do find the Jazz Age melodrama as compelling as anything else, because you have to, right, and you have to remember, I mean, the title of the movie, it is The 10 Commandments. It's not necessarily the story of Moses or the Prince of Egypt. It's about the Decalogue itself and how it relates to a contemporary audience.
Decalogue. There's a word I've never used. Aren't you clever? Yeah, it is very effective. Maybe now it would almost be comic because it would seem stereotypical. But at the time, it really packed a punch where somehow a commandment would suddenly come up and be shining on the wall in front of somebody the bad brother who had just committed an infraction. Is it subtle? No. Is it nuanced? No. But does it pack a punch? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are a fan of the version with Charlton Heston, like I am, it's one of my favorite movies ever made, you're going to notice in that prologue, these sequences were recreated shot for shot in a lot of ways. So even if you haven't seen this version, you might get a sense of deja vu.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But there's no Edward G. Robinson saying, talk about your Moses now.
Where's your deliverer now, Moses? Yeah,
or was it not Anne Bancroft? It was Anne
Baxter.
Anne Baxter, Moses. And now if you see it with a 4K restoration, some of those gowns were pretty translucent. Please put your mind back into the early Jazz Age, where there really is a conflict between the righteous moms and dads in the Bible Belt and the young folks, packing their whiskey bottle on their hip flasks. And DeMille manages to speak to both sides of this, or at least appeal to both sides, and come out looking like he's preaching, but at the same time showing a fair amount of side boob in the course of the action. That's the issue with DeMille, and just have fun with it and recognize the audience that it was intended for 101 years ago.
Well, Tracey, thank you so much. If you're in the audience, please stick around after the film so you can hear the rest of our conversation. Without further ado, the original version of The 10 Commandments. To me, this movie certainly still packs a punch 101 years later.
Yeah, it does. I presume everybody in the audience is now full of popcorn and needs to pee. But if you are still here with us, I hope you enjoyed seeing a very young Richard Dix and Theodore Roberts, who usually played character roles, getting to be Moses. And I thought the fellow, and I blanked on his name, who played Pharaoh, was just physically very beautiful. You know, he had it all, and they did figure out how to part the Red Sea. The fellow who did the effect, nobody ever gave away the secret, but he figured it out apparently watching a child put a spoon into pudding.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can kind of go from there. But DeMille tells a story of where they were all set up and the people were going across the sand, but it was supposed to look like they were in the ocean. And so they had these posts set up along the route so that they wouldn't wander into where the sea was. They had to stay between the posts. And because those posts would cast a shadow, they had to film exactly at high noon. The shot had to begin at a very specific time. And about 10 minutes to noon, DeMille goes, "That just looks like sand. That doesn't look like the bottom of the sea." Mm-hmm. And he realized they needed to throw kelp on it so it would look. So everybody is out there, wading into the ocean and grabbing kelp and throwing it in the sand just in time for them to fire the gun and get through and get the shot, because, of course, it involved thousands of extras and, they wanted it to look right.
Yeah. And I mean, say what you will about Cecil B. DeMille as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. I know he gets criticized a lot, but I mean, he certainly had an attention to detail. And I think you can see that in all of his films.
Yes, yeah. And he is an effective director. My complaint with DeMille, and I know it's a very common one, is that this guy who was just so talented in the teens took his talent, and by the late 20s and into the 30s, he's just directed the talent towards kind of a lower common denominator of American taste. And you probably never go wrong going for the lower common denominator. Samson and Delilah, and the one where I think it was Sign of the Cross, where Claudette Colbert was taking the bath naked in milk. He knew his market, and he spoke to it very effectively. I want to put in a pitch for Film Preservation Society. If you enjoy Richard Dix, the good brother with the pipe, who wasn't brave enough to propose to the girl directly, and that's how he got in trouble, Film Preservation Society has restored a Richard Dix comedy called Too Many Kisses, and it is the introduction onto film of Harpo Marx in a silent film, but it's still delightful. And if you are a William Powell fan, William Powell plays the villain brilliantly in this movie. So if you go to www.filmpreservationsociety.org and then click on the shop button, you can find this, and I think you'll enjoy it very much. It will certainly help film preservation if you should be so inclined as to buy a Blu-ray.
Oh, of course. So this one, I never thought that's quite a cast. Richard Dix, William Powell, and Harpo Marx in the same film.
In the same film. And, it works. It's a Paramount comedy. It's charming.
And what year was that?
1925.
So it was after the Ten Commandments.
Yes. And I will double check that. It also has with it the complete restored House that Shadows Built, which has never been seen in a good version. And that is the film that Paramount made at their 25th their 25th anniversary. And so it has clips of marvelous silent films, many of which are otherwise lost. For example, the Lon Chaney sequence in
The Miracle Man?
Miracle Man is the only footage they have from it is from The House That Shadows Built, which is the second feature. And then we've got a biograph restoration 1910 short called A Child's Impulse with young Mary Pickford on there, and it really is worth having and worth seeing. So check out our shop if you're still in the theater.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to what you said in the intro, how when you first saw this film, The Ten Commandments, it was kind of in a lower quality presentation. And that reminds me, when I was growing up and discovering silent films for the first time, at that point, so many of them are in public domain. You would watch a really low quality VHS tape. It'd be fuzzy, grainy. Sometimes there'd be a canned
record
soundtrack
on to play with it, and it wouldn't match the action. Yeah.
It wouldn't match the action. If you were lucky, some of them just didn't have a score whatsoever. But then, so, my first exposure to something like Lon Chaney and Phantom of the Opera, it's like, I mean, it's okay, but I don't, but then when I would see the restored Kino version with the color tints and the original scoring,
in the theater.
Or see it, it's a completely different experience. So I just want to say thank you for Film Preservation Society, because you are actually making these movies watchable for the first time in almost a century.
Yeah, or seen. Many of these are not otherwise seen. And that's important. We've restored The Three Musketeers from Fairbanks's original, a fine-grained positive struck from his camera negative. We've most recently done William S. Hart restoration, some wonderful films. If you are ever tempted to show a good Western, we're happy to share William S. Hart films. And we've done a Douglas Fairbanks double feature of Mr. Fix-It and Double Trouble. Both were FPS restorations and otherwise had not been seen in any good form really since their original release. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and there's very little time to do it in because nitrate won't wait. So we're doing it as fast as we can, but the best that we can, and we appreciate everyone's support.
Well, Tracey, thank you for all the good work that you do. Do you have any closing thoughts on the Ten Commandments or DeMILLE in general as a filmmaker?
Behave them all, people. Behave them all, or you're in trouble, evidently, because if you break them, they'll break you.
Ms. Tracey Goessel, thank you so much for your time and your work.
Oh, so happy to do it, Ryan. Take care.
If you're in the audience, I hope you enjoyed tonight's film. Once again, my name is Ryan Bijan. We'll see you next time.